Hello, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 51 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is an episode that I think a lot of us thought might not happen because we're recording to you just a few days before Duke plays in the Sweet 16, which didn't look like it was going to happen earlier this season. But yes, we are still alive after the first weekend of the NCAA Tournament. I am joined, as I always am, by my two partners in crime in Denver, Colorado. It is very, very early. We're doing this early on Monday morning. It is really early in Denver, isn't it, Sam Klein?
Yeah. When I woke up this morning, there was a 4 at the front of my alarm clock.
Ooh, that does not feel good.
I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
I'm doing great. I'm killing it today.
Also on the also on the East Coast with me, where it's a little bit later in the day. There's currently a 7 in front of the clock for us, Donald Wine.
It's still early. I don't care what number is in front. It's still early here.
This is true. So, guys, the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, God, it was great. It was awesome. We're going to talk in a little bit about, favorite game of the weekend. And boy, there are a lot, other than the Duke games, there are a lot of them to pick from. But we're going to begin with the business at hand, which is the Duke Blue Devils took care of business against the Yale Bulldogs. We beat Yale 71-64 in a game that was a laugher early on. I was loving it. I was having a great time. And then I started getting a little bit more nervous, and then freaking out nervous, and then we held on at the end. So, Donald, I'll tell you what, why don't you get things started for us? Tell me a little bit about the Yale game where we were winning by more than 20 in the first half and only ended up winning by 7, and it was a 3-point game at one point down the stretch.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that we came out hot. We came out on fire, actually. In the first half, we shot 61% from the floor and 60% from 3. And that's great. That's exactly what you wanted to do to get a lead on Yale and kind of temper the momentum of the underdog story, right? Like you don't want the underdog to feel like they have any chance of winning, especially early.
And the home crowd, as I predicted, they had a home crowd.
Yes, they did. And even the people who were there for the previous game, which was Wichita State and Miami, most of those people who stayed were cheering for Yale as well. But I think that was the key. We rebounded very well in the first half. I think the rebounding margin was 18-14 Yale, which Yale is one of the top 10 defending and rebounding teams in the entire country. So that was a good stat. The second half, we started missing shots, and we went absolutely ice cold. We shot 27% in the second half. Meanwhile, they took off and they started hitting their shots. It wasn't like a run that really was very quick, but over the course of the second half, they had enough chance to catch up. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh my God, they're only down 3 points. And that's when America thought they could do it. But we somehow held it off down the stretch with free throws and great defending. We did very, very well. Shooting the basketball at the line. I think we were 14-16, which is great. You have to make your free throws down the stretch. And I think those are two of the keys of the game. There's other keys, but I'll throw it to Sam to see what he thought.
Obviously, the Duke's hot shooting in the first half was what ultimately won the game because they built a lead that even though Yale managed to claw back most of it, never actually retook, right? And at halftime, I think I felt what Jason was describing was that giddiness, but at the same time being like, what are they gonna? Is Duke gonna score 100 points in this Yale team that we know has a pretty good defense and that is one of the best rebounding teams that we've faced all year? I didn't think that the quality of the game would turn so quickly, but I knew that the offense would slow down a little bit. I think that the defense also got maybe the guys got a little too confident. I think there were some comments from Kay after the game about how I'll pull up the exact comment. It was something about how this team is a house on a cliff, and we just hope that it doesn't rain. The margin for error here is really small. Obviously, Duke doesn't have that many guys they can sub in, and the defense, I think, got a little loose in the second half because the guys felt, we're up by 20, 22 points. What's the worst that could happen? and it did happen.
We saw it.
Yeah, no, and we absolutely saw it. But then when they employed the 1-3-1 defense, I think that was really key for this team, and that's something that I don't think Coach K is going into each season being like, I can't wait to figure out when we're going to employ the 1-3-1 defense. It's not a normal Duke calling card. But when you have Brandon Ingram at the top of it, and when you have Marshall Plumlee playing in the middle of it, it can be very effective. And that's actually one of the reasons I was so worried about Plumlee going out with fouls late in the game, is that we were going to have Jeter playing the defense. And Jeter doesn't do it nearly as well as Plumlee does. Plumlee takes up space in the middle of the 1-3-1 really well. But I think that the star in that area was Brandon Ingram. His length forced Yale to make a bunch of bad passes. They were kept timid, and there were times when they broke it. But ultimately, that defense was really effective in containing them.
It's funny at the start at halftime when we're winning by 23 points. It's 48-25. I sort of, I'll sometimes in my head, one of the ways I look at basketball is I'll say, okay, at this point, how many points is it going to take to win this game? Where are we going to get those points? And, are we capable of scoring that? And at halftime, I sort of looked at it and I went, God, they only have 25 points. I mean, we had not only dominated them offensively, but they had done nothing. They had done nothing on offense themselves. And I was like, you know what? If we get to 70, we're winning this game. And so throughout the second half, I was sort of in my head going, 70 is the number. Like, they're not going to score 45 points on us in the second half, I thought. So 70 was the number I was looking for. And we did, by the way, end up getting to 70, 71, in fact. But I was like, oh my God, I don't know if we're going to get to 70. Our offense was really, really struggling. Donald, you brought up that we shot 61% in the first half. The number in the second half was 27%. I want to ask you guys, do you know how many field goals Duke made the entire second half?
I do, but only because I was just looking at it. So maybe Donald can guess.
I remember reading about this, or actually at the end of the game, because they mentioned that we had made 6 field goals in the second half. And that was with like 2 minutes left. So I don't think we made another one down the rest of the game.
We did not. 6 field goals the entire second half. Grayson Allen hit a 3 with 17 minutes left in the half when things were still looking great for us. And then he had a little, a 2, a sort of not quite a layup, but one of those, sort of stretching layup that he hit with about 6 minutes left in the game. Other than that, all the field goals were Brandon Ingram. He had 4 field goals. He had
Only
a 3.
2 guys scored in the second half.
I'm sorry?
Only 2 guys scored in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong. Luke Kennard had 2 free throws.
Oh. There you go.
But yeah, Brandon Ingram had 14 of our 23 points the second half. Grayson Allen had 7, and Luke Kennard hit 2 free throws. Man, I mean, we were hanging on by our fingernails almost doesn't do it justice. I thought Coach K, you were talking, Sam, about some of the stuff Coach K had to say after the game. One of the things he said after the game that I thought was really telling was he said, we've got 3 18-year-olds out there, and sometimes they just get lost in the amusement park.
Yeah, that was a great
line. I love that line, and it's very true. We are still an incredibly young team, as we pointed this out, time after time throughout the year, an unbelievably young team trying to get it done. And Grayson Allen, who's our undisputed team leader, basically didn't play last season as a freshman. So I guess games like this are going to happen, but thank God for the first half. That was so much of a joy to watch. I mean, what Grayson did in the first half was absurd. He single-handed. There was a point with about a minute and a half left where he was beating Yale by himself.
Do you guys? I wanted to bring up one thing that was maybe a definitive negative in this game. Just to talk about real quick, which was the offensive skill set that Matt Jones was displaying in the second half. There was a point there where he lost a bunch of balls. Heck, can you guys remember a player who was so? Matt Jones might have been the star of the team in the first half secretly because he defended the crap out of Makai Mason, who was held way back from his normal season averages. I don't know how many. He was
2 of 12. Makai Mason was 2 of 12 on the game.
Well, and a lot of that was Matt Jones in the first half. Some of it was Derek Thorne, but a lot of it was Matt Jones. But then in the second half, Matt Jones just couldn't hold on to the ball on offense. can you guys remember a player who was so one-sided in such an important game? I mean, that wasn't a good sign for us, was it?
Well, he also had 3 fouls in the first half as well, so it wasn't like he had an incredibly great game. I think he had one of his worst games, of his career probably against Yale. He had 0 points, he had 1 rebound, 2 assists, and 2 turnovers. And I felt like in the second half, just like you said, it felt like it was probably like 20 turnovers because every time he got the ball, you almost were like, somebody else take the ball so that Matt doesn't have to handle it. And it seemed like a lot of bad things were happening at that point.
Let's not forget that this guy, is mostly playing point guard for us.
Right.
I mean, especially in this game,
which is also a conundrum.
Yeah, for the most part, he and Derek Thornton were splitting time in this game, and oh wow, yeah, it was a rough game for him. And Duke, there are a lot of Duke fans who are just killing him on the DBR and elsewhere, and it's unfortunate because this guy, the unfortunate part is that everyone sees offense and doesn't see enough defense, and Matt Jones deserves tremendous credit on a team, a Duke team that has struggled a great deal with defense. Matt Jones has been the defensive stalwart, and I'm glad we gave him the credit for what he did on Mekhi Mason. But he's a proud player. He is a good offensive player, as he's shown throughout the year a number of different times. A very good spot up shooter when guys like Kennard and Ingram and Grayson Allen are driving the ball and feeding him on the perimeter. I think he will have a big comeback game against Oregon. In fact, one of the ways I look at the games, I go, wow, MP3 had 2 points. Matt Jones didn't score. And we still it's not like other than Grayson Allen, I don't think we shot like crazy lights out. I mean, we were still pretty good, but and we managed to win. Maybe we've got a game in us coming up now where Jones and Plumlee can lead us as they have on many occasions. Did I just say?
Hopefully, I was going to say, and hopefully, in the next game, Matt Jones isn't tasked with bringing the ball up against the press.
I wanted to mention one final note that was a similarity that I was thinking of during the game as this comeback was happening. Back in 2001, when we were in the Final Four against Maryland, we were down 22, and Coach K calls a timeout and famously yells at the team and says, "You're playing like you're going to lose by 40. Just play." And basically his thing was, don't worry about the lead, just chip away 1 point at a time, 1 possession at a time. And that's kind of how Yale got back into this game. It wasn't like a blitzkrieg of points. It was just, slowly but surely you looked up at every TV timeout. They were only down 19, they were down 15, and all of a sudden they were down 7, and then all of a sudden they're down 3, and you realize, how did they come all the way back from that 27-point lead? And it was just that they chipped away, little by little, and didn't panic and didn't really get down on themselves, even with that big lead that everybody pretty much accounted them out. So I just want to end by giving credit to them because they kind of performed the way we would in that situation back in the day, just chipping away the lead and not really giving up on yourself. And they almost had a chance to really make some noise at the end.
Yeah, I agree with you. That Yale team was very impressive, and I would not want to see them again anytime soon.
Hey, you know what, guys? Before we look ahead, I was about to say, hey, did I just segue us to the Oregon game? Before we look ahead to Oregon, I want to continue to reflect a little bit on the first 2 rounds of the tournament. The ACC, oh my goodness. The ACC has set a record by putting six teams in the Sweet 16. Never been done before in the history of the NCAA tournament. The previous record of 5 was set by the old Big East in 2009 before we gobbled up a few of their members. And then last year, a conference tied that record, also sending 5 teams to the Sweet 16. And that conference was also the ACC. And let's not forget, the ACC also includes a Louisville team that probably would have been like a number 3 seed if they were eligible, if they hadn't had hookers appealing to recruits.
That was put nicely.
Yeah. No subtlety there from Jason, right?
No.
Yahoo, by the way, Yahoo Sports in their article about the dominance of the ACC, and there's no way to call it other than dominance, aside from Pittsburgh, which lost. By the way, the Pittsburgh game they lost to Wisconsin one of the worst games of basketball.
Yeah, disgusting.
It was
two
like
teams
vintage Wisconsin.
They basically combined for less than 90 points, not in a half in the entire game. Oh, it's just horrid.
And Pitt was
game.
I was like, when I picked that game in my bracket, I was like, I think Pitt can score 49 points because I think 49 points would win this ball game. And you know what? I was correct.
It would have.
The only thing I wasn't correct in is that they didn't score 49 points.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just dreadful game. But aside from Pittsburgh, every ACC 2-0 over the weekend. But Yahoo pointed out, I thought this was really interesting. The ACC to reach the Sweet 16 beat 2 16 seeds, a 15 seed, 2 14s, a 13, a 12, 2 11s, 2 9s, and a 7.
So they didn't have the toughest gauntlet, but they still made it through.
Yes. But right, it's worth pointing out, you still have to beat the teams in front of you, and that's what the ACC has done.
I'm sure Michigan State would love to have beaten even one of those teams.
Exactly. So guys, let's talk a little bit about the opening weekend. I'll ask the question: what was your favorite game, or just tell me about one game that you think is incredible, and don't take Texas A&M scoring 12 points in 30 seconds. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Take whatever game you want. Sam, you can start. Which one was incredible?
I was going to start with my comment about the ACC, which I sent to you guys last night, which is there are 6 ACC teams in the Sweet 16. There's at least one in each of the 4 regions. So my modest proposal is that if 4 ACC teams somehow make the Final Four, which would include Duke, it would have to include Duke, that if that happens, that they should just move the Final Four from Houston to the Greensboro Coliseum. And I'm gonna start a movement for that, which will probably promptly end when UNC loses to Indiana. So
I like it. That's a nice idea. That's a good one.
I'll take the Indiana game. It was a really fun, high quality basketball game. And Kentucky just didn't have the firepower to outlast Tom Crean's Indiana team, who moves on to the Sweet 16 and gets to play UNC. I'm mostly picking it for the credit that I want to take for picking Indiana to get that far. I think that a lot of folks felt strongly about Kentucky, and that there was a little bit of a trend for folks across the country to take Chattanooga in Indiana's first game, and Indiana waxed the floor with Chattanooga. It was a 99-74 affair. Other than that, obviously, Jason wanted to talk about the Texas A&M UNI game, so I will let him do that. The one other one that I wanted to highlight was the end of the Wisconsin Xavier game, which was an exciting game, and the buzzer-beating shot that Wisconsin had was Bronson Koenig falling into his own bench. It's not clear why he sidestepped farther away from the basket to go take the shot. I guess he was getting himself open, but he took just a ridiculous shot, and that was awesome. We're obviously familiar with Wisconsin, but that shot was awesome, and then the celebration afterwards was great too, because half the guys ran onto the floor to celebrate, and the other half jumped on Bronson Koenig, who was back behind the bench because he had fallen over so much. Go ahead, Jason, what you're saying.
Well, I was going to say about that shot. So I looked at that and I was like, oh my God, that's a Steph Curry shot. That was it was a typical Steph falling out of bounds with a defender all over him kind of shot. And when they interviewed Bronson Koenig after the game, he said, yeah, I did my best Steph Curry impression. I'm like, yes. Nice. I wasn't the only one who noticed it. And I saw an incredible statistic about Bronson Koenig. After he hit a 3-pointer to tie the game with 20 seconds left or something like that, and they put up a stat that said that in the last 5 minutes of games, he was 15 of 30 on 3-pointers over the course of the season. He was hitting 50% of his threes in the last 5 minutes of games, which is pretty good. And I was like, damn, that's impressive. And then he comes down and he went above 50% by hitting that other one, which was
it was ice cold too.
It was crazy.
And now they get to play a Notre Dame team that struggled to beat Stephen F. Austin. Man, Wisconsin might be waltzing into the Elite Eight in a down year where their coach retired mid-season.
Yeah.
So the Texas A&M Northern Iowa game, and look, I mean, it went to 2 overtimes. which is great. There were a number of huge shots. Northern Iowa was burying in threes and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, this was even worse than the Duke Maryland game in 2001, where Duke, gone in 50 seconds, where Jason Williams scores 10 points. Duke and Jason Williams scored 10 points in the last 51 seconds to tie the game. In the NCAA tournament, Northern Iowa was leading 69-57 with 35 seconds left in the game.
And then they forgot how to inbound the ball.
Yep.
How do you blow a 12-point lead in 35 seconds in the NCAA tournament?
It's start inbounding the ball to the wrong to sidelines and to opposing players consistently.
Oh my God!
It was like a steal at that point.
They mentioned, I saw it on Twitter. I forgot the reporter who mentioned it, but they looked it up and said it was the largest comeback in the history of college basketball. Not just the tournament, college basketball history.
I mean, I'm not sure how you necessarily determine that, because I'm sure there have been comebacks from more from.
It was a largest comeback under a minute.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you go under a minute, I wouldn't be surprised. Down 12 with less than a minute. But again, it was down 12 with 35 seconds left. 4 turnovers in the final 35 seconds. Wow. Wow. It's just terrifying.
And as exciting as their win was in the first round against Texas, how brutal of a loss in the second round against Texas A&M, right?
Yeah. Well, and by the way, like, you would think they would have just packed it in and folded up after that, but they played 2 overtimes. And it was a very close competitive game down to the second overtime. In fact, Northern Iowa had leads in overtime where it looked like they might hold on and win again.
Hey, and in that, I was going to add just to that first UNI game against Texas when they made the half court shot at the end.
Yes, Jesperson
backboard. I was shouting at my television as soon as they like lined up to inbound that ball. There were only like 2.5 seconds left or something. As soon as they lined up, what was the first thing that every Duke fan noticed, or every Duke fan should notice, is that Texas wasn't guarding the inbounder. And I was screaming at my TV, "You have to guard the inbounder!" I'm screaming it as UNI like inbounds the ball and then runs it up to half court and takes the shot. And I threw up my hands and I was like, "Of course it's going in. It has to go in. If you don't guard the inbounder, horrible things are going to happen to you." And lo and behold, Texas was ousted in the first round.
So you took one half of my favorite moment of the first round. And so it was, if you remember, it was late on Friday night when the UNI game happened against.
Oh, you're going to talk about the 2 games within 30 seconds.
Within like 35 seconds of each other. Yeah. So my brother went to Texas. Commiserations to all the Texas X's out there. So that happened, the half court shot. And then not 30, maybe I think they said it was 2.5 real minutes later. St. Joe's was playing Cincinnati, and St. Joe's had just hit a 3 to take the lead by 2 with about 6 seconds left. Cincinnati drives the length of the floor, passes off to a guy who dunks the ball with no time left. They review it, and it's the most heartbreaking thing. The dude had a shade of a fingertip on the basketball as time expired when he was dunking it. So the basket did not count, and St. Joe's went on to win that game by 2.
It's not even a tenth of a second.
Yeah,
I think it's like a half of a tenth. I mean, that
2.5 minutes. That 2.5 minutes is the definition of why there is nothing like March Madness. For just the fact that we were, people probably had games on their TV, 2 laptops, and a phone, and that wasn't enough, because every single moment of this tournament so far has had some breaking action that has made you want to go, what game do I put on my TV? What game do I put on my phone? What game do I put on my laptop? Why am I not split screening this? Because that was a point where we were split screening, and that was the only reason that we, me and my friends saw the ending of that St. Joe's game, is because we had a split screen on our TV. So that is the definition of madness. Like, everything happening at once, the ebbs and flows, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, basically by a shade of a fingertip. That is really why college basketball, the NCAA tournament, the first couple of days, they should be holidays, in my opinion, because nobody should be doing anything but watching.
By the way, going back to the ACC really quickly, I just read something on ESPN that I forgot to mention earlier. The way the way the NCAA determines how much money you get from the basketball tournament, how much money each conference gets, is by the number of games you play. The fact that the ACC has sent 6 teams to the Sweet 16 is worth more than $30 million to the conference, because each game is worth $265,000, and you get the money paid out over 6 years and all this other kind of stuff. And the ACC is guaranteed at least 6 more games. It's stunning. It's unbelievable how much last year and this year our success is going to impact the bottom line of ACC teams in terms of financial payout. $30 million because of the success of the ACC in this year's tournament. And by the way, no ACC team is matched against another one. We're probably going to put multiple teams into the final 8. Almost certainly we are, which is really cool. What do we think? We got anything else on this year's tournament so far?
No, let's move ahead and look at next weekend, which is going to be awesome.
Yes, and that means moving ahead and talking about the Oregon Ducks. Oregon, of course, won a very, very late night game against St. Joe's. They were actually down in that game. It was a back and forth kind of game. Oregon had the lead most of the time, and then St. Joe's took the lead for a while. St. Joe's was actually up by 7 points with 5 minutes left. It was like at 1 a.m. or something like that, and I'm not sure how many people were still watching, but Oregon then proceeded to outscore St. Joe's by 12 points in the final 5 minutes and notched the win 69-64. It wasn't a elegant offensive game, not by any stretch of the imagination. But Sam, I'll start with you. What can you tell us about the Oregon Ducks, the number 1 seeded Oregon Ducks, best team in the Pac-12 that Duke will be playing in the Sweet 16?
Yeah, they were tough down the stretch. Although I wonder how much more gas they had in the tank, just given that the game was being played in Spokane. So Oregon probably has to take like an hour-long flight to get there, and St. Joe's has to fly from Philadelphia to Spokane, which can't be fun. But Oregon is currently sitting at 12 in KenPom, which makes me think that they were a little bit worse than that before. And they're 43rd in adjusted defense and 11th on offense. So they actually profile pretty similar to Duke in that regard. In that the offense is a little better than the defense. Obviously, Oregon's defense ranks a lot higher than Duke's. But I was impressed with their ability down the stretch to get points in different ways. They had a couple guys who were scoring pretty well. Tyler Dorsey is their main scorer from outside. He hits 42% of his threes, and but then they also had points coming in the paint and on drives. So it was an impressive team to watch. I am obviously, you say we're worried about playing them. This is probably it's definitely going to be the best team that we've played so far in the tournament, and a team that I think, despite the fact that no one gets to see them because they're on the West Coast and they play on the Pac-12 network a lot. A team that would have been very competitive in the ACC this year, and it's a bummer that Duke has to fly all the way to Anaheim to get them. So hopefully Anaheim this weekend at least is not the home of the Ducks the way that it normally is. But yeah, I was impressed with Oregon. I enjoyed watching them despite their goofy uniforms and while I think the point I was about to make before was, on some level it's like, oh, I'm scared to play them, but hey, Duke's the 4 seed, and so they get to play a 1 in the Sweet 16, and this is how it works. So that being said, I don't think that if Brandon Ingram and Grayson Allen and Luke Kennard are hitting shots the way they did in the first half against Yale, that anyone is going to beat Duke. Even an Oregon team that also can spread the ball around and score in a number of different ways. They have 4 guys who score in double figures. So it's an impressive group, and I am excited to see what Duke does against them. We don't get a lot of opportunities against Pac-12 teams, although we did get to play Utah in a thrilling game earlier this season. So I think that if Duke wins this game, it's going to be a very impressive victory, and also one that is totally on the side of Duke playing with house money at this point, because we're playing a team that's seated higher than us and in the Sweet 16, a place that I don't think a lot of Duke fans would have guaranteed that we were going to get to, especially given the matchup problem that Baylor or Yale was going to present to us. So I'm happy to be there, and I'm glad that Duke has an extra day and a half to prepare for them than they do for us.
Donald, what you got on Oregon?
So the first thing I wanted to mention is a quirky little thing that happened during their game last night against St. Joe's. If a lot of people recall and know about St. Joseph's mascot, their hawk flaps every moment of the game. It flaps for the entire game. Its wings. And Oregon,
it's not a real hawk. It's not a real hawk.
It's not a real hawk. It is a mascot. So it's a guy
that would
who
be cool if it was.
That would be really awesome if you could train a hawk to flap its wings the whole time and not fly away.
But it is a guy who is literally flapping his wings for the entire game. It does not stop. It is known to not stop. They have had people attempt to sabotage it by tackling it or something like that, and they still flap. So the Oregon Duck, which as most people know, is basically looks like a souped up Donald Duck, more cartoony, stood in front of the St. Joseph mascot at halftime and mimicked him by flapping his wings, the way that St. Joseph's does. And it was really funny because they were literally about maybe 20 feet away from each other, staring each other in the face and just having a flap off. Obviously, the Blue Devil does not have wings, so there will not be a flap off. But I'm curious to see what kind of antics the mascots will have between the two teams in Anaheim. But one thing I wanted to point out, getting back to the actual team, is that Dylan Brooks, I don't know if we mentioned him yet, but he is their best scorer, and he at times looked ferocious, especially inside. He could score from just about anywhere except for 3-point. He didn't really shoot well from three, but he is one of those guys that you're like, okay, you need to look out for him because he is a scorer. He doesn't shoot that well. He did actually shoot well from three last night. It's over the course of the season that he was not a very good particular three-point shooter. He shoots about 32% from three normally. So maybe last night he was hot, but he went off in basically the first half and into the second half when Tyler Dorsey took over. And I thought he was very strong, both on the offensive end, but also on defense. He's one of their guys that if he doesn't play well, then they're going to have a bad night. So that's somebody to look out for.
So, I mean, the thing that I've noticed, and I've seen pieces of Oregon play multiple games this year, this is a long and athletic team, and they're very, very quick. They aren't tremendously deep. I mean, they're capable of playing 8 or 9 guys, but for the most part, they're playing like yesterday against St. Joe's in a very close game in the NCAA tournament. They only played 7 players, although the guys off their bench that they used, both played well into double digit, around 20 minutes. So they got around 40 minutes from their bench, which is pretty good bench time and pretty good bench production. But they are to some extent, I don't want to say Golden State. I don't want to say that they're the Golden State Warriors, but they're not entirely different from that because everybody on the team shoots really well. Everyone on the team handles the ball pretty nicely. They rebound collectively as a team. It's not the kind of team where there's 1 or 2 guys who are inside and then some guys who are outside. This is a team with a lot of guys who do a lot of similar things and work together as a team really well. They're going to present some major challenges for Duke. There's a reason they're a number 1 seed. Now, I don't think their resume or their performance is as good as the other number 1 seed. So to some extent, and we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when the bracket came out and we were, looking at a potential matchup with Oregon in the Sweet 16, and we said, this is not a bad road for Duke. I'll take the Oregon Ducks as our 1 seed all day long, but they're still a very, very talented team. Like everyone on the team shoots 3-pointers. It's kind of crazy. The number of threes that they're willing to take, and it doesn't matter who's shooting them. I mean, Marshall's going to have to go out to the perimeter and guard guys on the perimeter because even they're big men.
Or we'll have to employ that trapping zone defense highly effectively.
Yeah, Chris Boucher, who's their tallest player, stands 6'10". Even he's willing to take a number of. He shot more than 100 3-pointers in the season. So they are entirely willing to put the ball in the hands of anyone in any position. They're very much one of these teams with a lot of interchangeable parts, and it's going to be really interesting, to see how we do against them. Duke has more than a puncher's chance in this game. I'm sure Vegas will install Oregon as, my bet would be, around a maybe a 3 or 4 point favorite at the most. It'll be a very, very competitive game, I suspect. Duke's going to have to. We're going to have to shoot well. I'm not saying we're going to have to shoot the way we shot in the first half against Yale, because there's no way to do that consistently. Boy, I would love it if we did that. Yeah, boy, that'd be fun. But we're going to have to shoot fairly well. We're going to need contributions from Matt Jones and Marshall Plumlee more than we got offensively, at least in the previous game. But we've got a decent chance in this game.
I wanted to add one more thing, one impressive thing about Oregon. Jason, are you okay there? I thought I heard some weird.
Absolutely. Go. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Sorry. I wanted to add one more impressive note about Oregon. I mentioned that we had gotten to play Utah earlier this year, another Pac-12 team. Oregon, and we know that Utah is a strong team. They're advancing to the Sweet 16 or no? Now I can't even remember.
No.
They lost to
Gonzaga. They got creamed by Gonzaga. But Utah was a strong team. Oregon beat them 3 times, including an 88-57 win in the Pac-12 championship game. So, even against a strong team like Utah, Oregon was able to really pound it home against them. And so we have we have that as a common opponent. There's 3 games worth of tape that Duke can watch. So we'll see what kind of game plan Coach K comes up with. And as I mentioned, which I think is actually a really big thing for Duke, is the extra day and a half of rest. So Duke was home, Saturday afternoon from Providence, and they got to watch the whole Oregon game, just like with the team, and they'll have plenty of time to like rest and come up with a game plan before flying all the way to Anaheim.
The final note I wanted to make was last night, Oregon had 7 blocks, and they're a good team. They were really, really athletic in the paint, especially not just with their blocks, but with the some of the shots that they altered just by the fact that they had blocked so many shots. So we're going to have to really watch it when we have our guards drive the lane. They're going to be looking to probably feed us into the lane where they think they have an opportunity to block a layup or block a shot off the glass. So I think that's going to be a key thing, and that's the reason why, as you said, Jason, we should probably shoot very well, because if we do that, I think that's going to open their defense up a lot more than it would if we aren't shooting well.
One more thing about Oregon. They are not a team that played a ton of really good teams, which I think is sort of, an interesting thing to know. We talked about how they did against Utah, and they were really impressive against Utah. But aside from Utah, they had a game against Baylor as well. Aside from those 2 games, from Utah and the opponents in the Pac-12 that they had to play, and that Baylor game, I may have missed it, but I didn't see. I mean, Oregon didn't venture out and play, the teams on the eastern half of the United States at all. No one from the Big Ten, aside from Baylor. I didn't see anything from the Big 12. Certainly, no one from the SEC, the ACC, the Big East. To some extent, they are a little not only unknown but somewhat untested. And by the way, they're we talked about Ken Pomeroy doesn't really like them. ESPN's BPI doesn't really, and ESPN's BPI, they're number 16. ESPN's BPI will rate Duke as a favorite in this game against Oregon. So it's going to be really interesting to me to see whether or not those sort of advanced metrics that say that Oregon isn't that great, or the polls, the rankings, and the RPI. Oregon scored very high in the RPI. See whether that's correct, and whether these guys are as good as the RPI says they are, or if they're as, I don't want to say bad, or not quite as good as some of the other advanced metrics seem to indicate. And one other thing, by the way, yes, Duke is going all the way across country to play in Anaheim, a long, long way to travel. And Oregon is the home team in the Western bracket. There's little question about that. They were placed in their most favorable bracket. But Anaheim is a pretty long way from Oregon. It's not like they're going right into their backyard. They're going a ways away, all the way down the entire western coast of the United States. I mean, Duke may have a 5.5-hour flight. I bet Oregon's got a 2.5 or 3-hour flight. So it's not like they'll be right in their backyard.
They don't have to. But
really...
they don't have to change. They don't have to change time zones, and the game is going to be at around 10 o'clock Eastern time.
I think
Thursday night.
11. I think it's 11 o'clock.
It's a 9:40 start.
Oh, is it 9:40? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's approximate. That's an approximate start.
That's approximate, and based on a first game that starts at 7:30, I think. So it's going to start about 10 o'clock Eastern time for Duke.
Yeah. Which will be a little unusual for us, but not horrible.
We did have some 9:30 games this year, so hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've really covered the tournament at this point. We've covered Duke's potential opponent over there in Oregon. By the way, should things work out, we will have another very, very tough opponent. This has been a bracket a year with a ton of upsets, double-digit seeds reaching the Sweet 16, 7 seeds reaching the Sweet 16, things like that. Out here out west, you got the 1, 2, 3, and 4. So and though there were some upsets in the first round, to get us to the second round, the Sweet 16 out west is number 1 Oregon, number 4 Duke, and on the other side, number 3 Texas A&M and number 2 Oklahoma. So the road to the Final Four goes to a 1 seed and then a 2 or a 3 seed. So no talk about Duke getting an easy road at this point. But in any event, guys, I think we're getting close to ready to wrap things up. We should do Player of the Week, or should we just call it Player of the Game against Yale?
Yeah, I think that we had we did a Player of the Game, I believe, after the Wilmington game. So let's just focus on the Yale game.
We did, and we had. By the way, we had 3 different guys after the UNC Wilmington game. Donald, why don't you start for us? Who's your Player of the Game against the Yale Bulldogs?
Against Yale? Let's see. Let me look at these little stats. I think Brandon Ingram.
Right.
Let me restart. For some reason, you
were utterly befuddled by that.
Yeah, for some reason, you said Wilmington, Sam, and I was like, Wilmington? We already discussed Wilmington. So when you said Yale, it literally threw me off because I went back to the Wilmington.
All right, let's
okay.
roll.
Oh no, we're keeping all this in, folks. Yeah. Usually we edit out these little things. This one's too good. This is too good. Donald had no idea who we played.
We played a team yesterday. So I'm gonna go with, and most people would probably say Grayson Allen was the player of the game. I'm gonna go with Brandon Ingram. He had 25 points. He had 5 boards, 2 assists, and was awesome. Just as awesome as Grayson Allen was during the game. So I think that's going to be my player of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Brandon
Sam,
Ingram.
your turn.
I'm going to echo Brandon Ingram. Grayson Allen shot a lot better, particularly in the first half. But Ingram did make some really special plays down the stretch. And as I noted before, it was his defense in the 1-3-1 zone that I think ultimately disrupted Yale and allowed Duke to get a little bit of their mojo back. So for Brandon Ingram, a 25-point effort and playing spectacular defense in that zone, I think that just on account of that, we're going to see it again against Oregon and hopefully continuing on.
So I refuse to make it unanimous. I was going to pick Brandon Ingram, but I'm not going to because I don't want to make it unanimous. And I'm very happy taking Grayson Allen. I have no problem taking Grayson Allen. Duke obviously does not win that game if we don't get out to a 23-point lead in the first half. And the 23-point lead in the first half was largely on the back of Grayson Allen going into the zone and refusing to leave it for the entire half. He was hitting absurd shots, whatever he wanted to do. I'm sure the NBA scouts were salivating over what they saw. Yeah, he demurred a little bit in the second half, but played 40 minutes. So 5 of 7 from 3-point range, 10 of 15 from the field. he was our leader, as he is almost every game, 29 points. Grayson Allen is my player of the game against the Yale Bulldogs. Gentlemen, do we have parting shots? Sam, I will go to you first if you got some parting note before we wrap things up here.
I love the NCAA tournament. That's it. That's all I got.
Damn, you stole mine.
Oh,
Well,
Donald, I wonder if he was going to say the same thing.
I think we can make it unanimous.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not a unanimous player of the week, but a unanimous parting shot.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a great time of year, isn't it? It's just a lot of fun. You know what? I'm going to do one more game. Seeing as we didn't name our, seeing as we didn't have big parting shots that took up a lot of time, we're about to wrap up. Guys, have a look at the bracket. Who's your Final Four? Now that we know the Sweet 16, who's your Final Four? And I'll give you all a second to look at the bracket. So I'll tell you mine to start with. I'm going to stick with the team I've been with all along in the West. People are going to hate me, but I've been picking Oklahoma from the start. So I'm still going to go with Oklahoma coming out of the Western bracket. Out of the Midwest, I'm sticking with the team that I have had from the beginning, the team that I believe will win the national title, and that is the University of Virginia Cavaliers. In the South, I love Kansas. I don't know how you can not love Kansas. I think they get an underachieving Maryland team. And I don't. Villanova was very impressive over Iowa, but I don't think that Villanova or Miami can beat Kansas. And I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. I think. By the way, all four of my Final Four teams are still alive, and I'm picking my four Final Four teams. UNC out of the East, which will set up a UNC versus Virginia on one side of the Final Four, and the other side will be Kansas versus Oklahoma. Big 12 against the ACC.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it'd be a lot. What'd be really cool is if they were matched up not against their conference opponent in the semifinals, but against against the other team. But instead, we will get two Big 12 teams and two Big East teams. I'm sorry, two ACC teams. But I'm rambling at this point. Sam, go ahead and you tell me who's your Final Four picks.
All right. I also have Oklahoma, which I believe is who I picked in the DBR challenge, as well as Indiana in the East. So I'm going to pick Indiana to upset North Carolina, and then to take out the winner of Notre Dame and Wisconsin. I think that Indiana is going to be better, at least than those teams. It's the UNC game that'll be tough for them. I foolishly picked Cal to go to the Final Four, despite not realizing that one of their coaches got fired for sexual harassment and their best player broke his hand. And so that was really stupid. They lost in the first round. My bracket is a total mess, even relative to most other people's total mess brackets. So give me Kansas, because that's the team I should have picked all along. And then in the Midwest region, I think I'm also going to take Virginia. So I got Virginia, Indiana, Kansas, and Oklahoma, although I would be happy for Oklahoma to get subbed out for our Duke Blue Devils.
Donald, your turn.
My turn. So in my bracket, I have 11 of my Sweet 16 still intact. I have 7 of my 8 Elite 8 teams still intact, and I have 3 of my Final 4 teams still intact, and I have 1 of my 2 finalists still intact. I would like to thank Michigan State for being that other team. So in the Midwest, I'm going to go with Virginia since it's not Michigan State. I will stick with our Blue Devils in the South. I have Kansas in the in the South, I have Kansas. In the West, I will stick with our Blue Devils. And in the East, I have Indiana in the Final Four. That would be 1 Big 12 team, and 2 ACC teams, and a Big 10 team. So I think that's hopefully how it goes for the sake of my bracket. But really, I'm just voting for anarchy. As long as Duke's not involved, anarchy can reign.
I like it. By the way, Sam made mention of the DBR bracket challenge. Congrats to both of you. There are 68 entries in the DBR challenge. Donald, you are in 5th place, tied for 5th. And Sam, you are a scant couple points, or 1 point, I should say, behind him, tied for 9th place.
What?
I am in 39th. Yes.
How did that happen?
Because everybody
I don't know.
yesterday.
I picked Cal to go to the Final Four.
And here's the thing: like, I picked Michigan State, and I wasn't really mad at the. And
I picked Michigan State.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people, like, I think you have a lot of points now that you can't get later. Like, of course, when we get to the Final Four, you know, some people who have more Final Four teams intact will have more opportunities to win points. And I think I'm in that bracket where I'm just behind the first place, but still have more points possible than the other guy.
Yeah.
So
Sam, can't have many points remaining.
Right, Sam, you have 47 points so far. Your total possible points is 99.
Yeah.
Donald has 48 points so far. His possible points is 148, and there are people still in the 170s in terms of potential points.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam, you look good at the moment, but I don't think it's going to work out for you long term. By the way, I still have 161 possible points. I'm actually one of the leading guys in terms of possible points, but unfortunately I only have 41 actual points. I need a lot of things to work out for me. I think though Virginia wins it all. I've got a really good chance of winning this thing. So we shall see. We shall see.
Awesome.
So that's it, huh?
Yeah, that's it. We're done. I got to go to work.
All right, guys. Thanks again for joining me. Duke basketball fans, thanks for joining all three of us on the DBR podcast, episode number 51. Sweet 16 coming up for Duke on Thursday, sometime around 10 o'clock or so. We'll be back with you after that game, hopefully to preview a Final Eight game against either Texas A&M or Oklahoma. Until then, I am Jason Evans, Sam Klein, and Donald Wine. Thank you for waking up early to do this podcast. Duke Band, thank you for waking us up early and take us home.